The night Elena Vale planned to give herself to the man she loved, she discovered their entire relationship was a lie, a cruel bet orchestrated by her boyfriend and best friend. But the real betrayal. The medical bills she thought he'd paid to save her dying father had actually come from someone else entirely. Someone darker. Someone dangerous. Victor Russo, her boyfriend's ruthless father, had been the one controlling her fate all along. And when Elena confronted him in his office, still wearing the red dress meant for his son, neither of them expected what would happen next. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far Elena's journey reaches. The champagne bottle felt heavier than it should have. Elena Vale stood in the hallway of Adrian Russo's penthouse apartment, her reflection ghosting across the mirrored walls. Red silk clung to her curves, a dress she'd saved 3 months to buy, working double shifts at the diner where grease stains had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Her dark hair fell in waves she'd spent an hour perfecting with a curling iron borrowed from her neighbor. Everything about tonight was supposed to be perfect. 6 months. That's how long she and Adrian had been dating. 6 months of stolen kisses in coffee shops, of him picking her up after her shifts in cars that cost more than her father's medical bills, of promises whispered against her skin in the dark. Tonight was supposed to be the night she finally gave him everything, her trust, her body, her future. The champagne was cheap, she knew that, but it was all she could afford after scraping together enough for the dress. Adrian wouldn't care, she'd told herself. He'd told her 100 times that money didn't matter to him, that she mattered, that their love was real despite the vast canyon between their worlds. She'd believed him. The penthouse door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she reached for the handle, a smile already forming on her lips. She'd planned her entrance carefully, walking in with confidence, setting the champagne down, letting him see her in this dress that made her feel beautiful for the first time in years. That's when she heard the laughter. Female laughter. Familiar laughter. Elena's hand froze on the door handle. Through the gap, she could see into Adrian's bedroom. Her boyfriend sat on the edge of his king-sized bed, his shirt unbuttoned, his expression relaxed in a way that made something cold settle in her stomach. And beside him, wearing nothing but one of his shirts, sat Melissa Chen, Elena's best friend since high school. The girl who'd held her while she cried about her father's cancer diagnosis. The one who'd encouraged her to give Adrian a chance when he'd first asked her out, insisting that he seemed different from other rich boys, that his feelings were genuine. "I can't believe you actually pulled it off," Melissa said, her voice carrying that edge of admiration Elena had heard 1,000 times before, only now it felt like poison. 3 months. That's longer than any of us thought you'd last. Adrian leaned back on his hands, grinning. "Please, it was easy. You just have to know what buttons to push. Girls like Elena, they're desperate to believe in fairy tales." Poor girl's sick dad working herself to death at that greasy diner. All I had to do was play Prince Charming. The champagne bottle slipped from Elena's fingers. She caught it at the last second, her knuckles white against the glass, her entire body gone numb. "The father thing was genius," Melissa continued, and Elena watched her best friend trace a finger down Adrian's chest. "Paying those medical bills? She probably thinks you're a saint." Adrian's laugh was sharp and cruel. "I didn't pay shit. My father took care of that months ago, some charity write-off for tax purposes. But Elena doesn't need to know that. Far as she's concerned, I'm her savior." "So when are you going to close the bet?" Melissa shifted closer, her lips brushing Adrian's jaw. "Marcus put $5,000 on you not being able to get her into bed within 6 months. You've only got 2 weeks left. Tonight, actually." Adrian's hand slid up Melissa's thigh, and Elena felt something fracture inside her chest. "She texted me an hour ago, said she was ready, that she wanted tonight to be special. She's probably on her way here right now, all dolled up and ready to give me her virginity, like it's some precious gift." They both laughed. The sound echoed through Elena's skull, drowning out the thunder of her heartbeat, the rush of blood in her ears, the tiny voice screaming at her to run. "You're terrible," Melissa said, but there was admiration in her voice. "What are you going to do when she gets here and finds us like this?" Adrian shrugged. "Tell her the truth. That it was all a game. That I never loved her. That girls from her side of town are good for exactly 2 things, a quick fuck and a good story to tell at the country club. And the second thing? Practice." Adrian pulled Melissa into his lap, his hands roaming with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never been denied anything in his life. Rich girls know the game. They expect the lies. But poor girls? They're so grateful for attention from someone like me that they don't see it coming. It's almost boring how easy they are. Elena's vision blurred. Her chest felt tight, like someone had reached inside her ribcage and was slowly crushing her heart in their fist. Every moment of the past 6 months replayed in her mind. Every kiss now poisoned, every promise now a calculated manipulation, every touch now a violation. The red dress that had made her feel beautiful suddenly felt like a costume, a joke, evidence of her own stupidity. She stepped back from the door, her legs shaking. The hallway tilted and swayed, but she forced herself to move, to put distance between herself and the sound of their laughter, to escape before they discovered her standing there like a fool. The elevator ride down felt like drowning. Elena stared at her reflection in the polished metal doors, red dress, perfect hair, careful makeup, champagne bottle still clutched in her trembling hands. She looked like someone heading to a celebration. She looked like someone in love. She looked like a lie. The lobby was empty except for the night doorman who tipped his hat as she passed. Elena didn't acknowledge him. She couldn't. If she opened her mouth, she would scream, and if she started screaming, she would never stop. Outside, the city stretched before her in a glittering sprawl of lights and noise. Cars rushed past, horns blaring. Couples walked hand in hand down the sidewalk, their laughter floating on the warm evening air. The world continued spinning, indifferent to the fact that Elena's had just shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. She walked without direction, her heels clicking against the pavement. The champagne bottle hung from her fingers, forgotten. She should go home. She should call someone. She should... Elena stopped walking. The building in front of her was 60 stories of steel and glass, its facade reflecting the city lights like a mirror. She knew this building. Everyone in the city knew this building. Russo Tower, the crown jewel of Victor Russo's empire, the seat of power for the man who controlled half the city's real estate and all of its shadows. Adrian's father, the man who had actually paid her father's medical bills. Elena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The grief that had threatened to drown her moments ago was transforming into something harder, colder. She thought of her father fighting for his life in a hospital bed while she worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep them afloat. She thought of the relief she'd felt when Adrian had told her not to worry, that he'd taken care of everything, that she could focus on her father's recovery instead of drowning in debt. It had all been a lie, another manipulation in Adrian's game. But Victor Russo had paid those bills, not out of love, probably not even out of kindness. A tax write-off, Adrian had called it. Charity for someone the Russo patriarch considered beneath his notice. Elena had never met Victor Russo. She'd heard stories, of course. Everyone had. He was a legend in the city, a self-made billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing, who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Adrian talked about his father with a mixture of resentment and awe, painting him as a man who valued power above all else, who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities, who had never lost a negotiation or backed down from a fight. A dangerous man. A ruthless man. A man Elena suddenly, desperately needed to see. She walked through Russo Tower's revolving doors before she could talk herself out of it. The lobby was all marble and chrome, designed to intimidate. A security guard looked up from his desk, his expression hardening as he took in her appearance. The cheap champagne, the too bright dress, the wild look in her eyes. "Can I help you, miss?" His tone suggested he was already preparing to throw her out. "I need to see Victor Russo." Elena's voice came out steadier than she expected. The guard's eyebrows rose. "It's 10 o'clock at night, mister. Russo doesn't take visitors without an appointment, and he certainly doesn't." "Tell him Elena Vale is here." She lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of defiance she possessed. "Tell him I'm here about the medical bills he paid for my father. Tell him I know what his son has been doing. And tell him that if he doesn't see me right now, I'll be at the New York Times by morning with a very interesting story about charity write-offs and the games rich boys play with poor girls." It was a bluff. Elena had no proof, no leverage, nothing but rage and heartbreak fueling her words. But something in her tone must have convinced the guard, because he picked up his phone, spoke in low tones, listened, and then looked at her with an expression somewhere between surprise and concern. 60th floor, he said slowly. "Mr. Russo will see you. The elevator on the right." Elena's heart slammed against her ribs as she crossed the lobby. Her reflection followed her in the polished surfaces. A girl in red silk with tear-streaked mascara and wild eyes, still clutching a bottle of cheap champagne like a weapon. The elevator doors closed with a soft hiss. As the car began its ascent, Elena caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls. What was she doing? Victor Russo was Adrian's father, a man who dealt in millions and controlled lives with phone calls and signatures. She was a waitress whose most valuable possession was a 3-year-old Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner. But the elevator kept rising, and Elena didn't press the stop button. Because beneath the fear, beneath the humiliation, something new was burning in her chest. Something that felt like power. The doors opened onto a private lobby that screamed wealth. Original artwork on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than her yearly rent, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that made her breath catch despite everything. A woman in her 50s sat at a sleek desk, her expression professionally neutral. "Miss Vale, Mr. Russo is expecting you." She gestured toward a set of double doors. "Please, go right in." Elena walked forward on legs that felt like water. She pushed open the doors and stepped into Victor Russo's office. The room was enormous, dominated by a wall of windows that turned the city into a backdrop. A massive desk sat near the windows, but the man standing beside it wasn't looking at her. He was pouring whiskey into 2 crystal glasses, his movements precise and unhurried. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Miss Vale," Victor Russo said without turning around. His voice was deep, controlled, edged with an accent that spoke of old-world origins and new-world power. "I haven't decided which yet." Elena closed the door behind her, her fingers tightening around the champagne bottle. "Does it matter?" That made him turn. Victor Russo was nothing like his son. Where Adrian was classically handsome in the way of boys who'd grown up beautiful and knew it, Victor was striking in a way that had nothing to do with conventional attractiveness. He was in his late 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that assessed her with the focus of a man accustomed to reading people's weaknesses. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her father's entire medical bill, but he'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. This was a man who'd built his empire with his own hands before he'd learned to delegate the dirty work. "No," he said after a long moment, his gaze tracking from her face to her dress, to the champagne bottle and back again. "I suppose it doesn't matter. Would you like a drink, Miss Vale? You look like you could use one." "I brought my own." Elena lifted the champagne bottle. Her voice was sharp. "I was going to share it with your son tonight, before I discovered he's been fucking my best friend and taking bets on how long it would take to get me into bed." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe, or recognition. "I see. And you decided to bring your champagne to my office instead?" "I decided to bring my rage to your office instead." Elena took 3 steps forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "You paid my father's medical bills, $200,000. Your son told me he paid them. He let me believe he'd saved my father's life, that I owed him everything. But it was you, wasn't it? Some tax write-off, some charitable gesture that meant nothing to you." "It was a business decision," Victor acknowledged, his tone giving nothing away. "Your father worked in one of my warehouses for 15 years. Good employee, loyal. When he got sick, my accountant suggested it would be good optics. So yes, Miss Vale, I paid the bills. And no, it meant nothing to me. Is that what you came here to hear?" The honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. Elena's grip on the champagne bottle tightened until she thought the glass might shatter. "I came here because I needed to look you in the eye. I needed to see the man who actually saved my father, while your son used it as leverage to humiliate me." "Adrian is many things," Victor said, and there was something cold in his voice now. "Most of them disappointing. What exactly did my son do to you, Miss Vale?" "He made me believe in fairy tales." Elena's laugh was brittle. "He made me believe someone like him could love someone like me. He made me believe I mattered. And then I stood outside his bedroom and listened to him tell my best friend that I was easy, that poor girls are desperate for attention from rich boys, that tonight he was going to take my virginity to win a bet." She watched Victor's jaw tighten, saw his fingers flex around his whiskey glass. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously soft. "Did he touch you?" "No." Elena lifted her chin. "I left before he could finish his game, but that doesn't change what he did. That doesn't change that every moment of the past 6 months was a lie designed to break me. Victor set down his glass with deliberate care. He moved around his desk, closing the distance between them until Elena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. This close, she could see the lines at the corners of his eyes, the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the intelligence burning behind his cold assessment. "What do you want from me?" he asked. It was a simple question, a direct question, and Elena realized she didn't have an answer. What did she want? An apology? Impossible. Victor Russo didn't strike her as a man who apologized for anything. Revenge? How? Adrian had humiliated her, but he'd broken no laws. Money? She could demand payment for emotional damages, probably even get it, but the thought made her sick. She didn't want charity. She didn't want to be bought. She wanted, "I want to matter," Elena heard herself say. The words came from somewhere deep and raw, a truth she hadn't known she was carrying. I want to be more than some poor girl who gets used and discarded. I want power. I want to never be invisible again. Something changed in Victor's expression. The cold assessment warmed into something else. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze tracking over her face like he was reading a book written in a language only he understood. "You came to my office dressed like that," he said slowly, "carrying champagne meant for my son, demanding to be seen. You threatened my security guard with media exposure, despite having no proof of wrongdoing. You're standing in my office at 10 o'clock at night, shaking with rage and heartbreak, asking me for power." He paused. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish." "You said that already," Elena shot back. "Have you decided which yet?" Victor's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Brave," he said. "Definitely brave. Possibly also foolish, but we'll see." He turned away from her, moving back to his desk. Elena watched him pour 2 more fingers of whiskey, her heart hammering. She should leave. She'd said what she needed to say. Looked him in the eye, made her point. There was nothing else to accomplish here, but her feet didn't move. "You want power, Miss Vale?" Victor asked, his back still to her. "Real power doesn't come from being seen. It comes from knowing what others need and using that knowledge to shape the world to your will. It comes from understanding that every interaction is a negotiation, every relationship a transaction, every connection a potential asset or liability." "Is that what I am?" Elena asked quietly. "A liability." Victor turned, and this time his smile was real, sharp and dangerous and entirely too knowing. "You're a question mark, Miss Vale, and I've built my empire by turning question marks into assets." He held out one of the whiskey glasses. Elena stared at it, her mind racing. If she took that glass, she was accepting something, a conversation, a negotiation, a door opening onto a path she couldn't see clearly. If she walked away now, she could return to her life, lick her wounds, move forward. She could return to being invisible. Elena took the glass, the whiskey burned going down, rich and smooth in a way that made her cheap champagne taste like regret. Victor watched her reaction, something like approval flickering across his face. "Tell me something, Miss Vale," he said. "When you were standing outside my son's bedroom, listening to him laugh about betraying you, what did you feel?" "Heartbreak," Elena answered automatically. "Before that, in the very first moment, before the pain set in, what did you feel?" Elena closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that hallway, to the moment before everything shattered. She'd heard Melissa's laughter, seen them together through the gap in the door, and felt stupid, she whispered. "I felt stupid for believing him, for trusting him, for thinking I could be enough." When she opened her eyes, Victor was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And now? What do you feel now?" "Angry." The word came out sharp. "Furious. I want him to hurt the way he hurt me. I want—" She stopped because the truth was too dark, too raw, too honest. Victor moved closer. "You want revenge. You want to make him feel small and powerless and invisible. You want him to know what it's like to be used and discarded." "Yes." The admission felt like relief. "I can give you that." Victor's voice dropped lower, intimate in a way that sent electricity down Elena's spine. "I can give you everything you're asking for. Power. Revenge. A life where you never have to be invisible again." Elena's pulse quickened. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're right." Victor set down his glass, his full attention focused on her with an intensity that made the massive office feel suddenly too small. Adrian has been a disappointment from the moment he was born. He's weak where he should be strong, entitled where he should be grateful, cruel where he should be strategic. He wastes his advantages and mistakes his privilege for power. He took another step forward. Elena didn't back away. You, on the other hand, walked into my office with nothing but rage and cheap champagne and demanded to be seen. You stood in front of me, a man most people fear, and asked for power without flinching. You're either extraordinary or you're going to be a magnificent disaster. Either way, Miss Vale, you interest me. The air between them felt charged with something Elena didn't have words for. This wasn't attraction, or at least it wasn't only attraction. It was recognition. The meeting of two people who understood what it meant to want more than the world was willing to give. What exactly are you offering me? Elena asked. Victor's smile was slow and predatory. A partnership. You want revenge on my son? Fine. I'll give you the tools to destroy him socially, financially, emotionally, whatever you prefer. You want power? I'll teach you how to wield it. You want to matter? I'll make you indispensable. In exchange for what? Your loyalty, your discretion, your willingness to learn. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. And perhaps, your company. I find myself suddenly very interested in seeing what you're capable of, Miss Vale, when properly motivated. Elena's hand trembled around her glass. She should say no. This was Adrian's father. This was wrong on so many levels she couldn't even count them. This was... One night, Victor said softly, and the words felt like a dare. Give me one night to show you what real power looks like. No obligations beyond that. No strings. Just you and me and the city spread out below us, discussing exactly how we're going to make my son regret the day he decided you weren't worth his honesty. Elena thought of Adrian, laughing with Melissa about how easy she'd been to manipulate. She thought of 6 months of lies, of the red dress she'd bought to feel beautiful, of the champagne meant to celebrate giving herself to someone who saw her as practice. She thought of walking away from this office and returning to her small apartment, her diner shifts, her invisible life where men like Adrian Russo could use her and discard her without consequences. One night, she heard herself say, Victor's smile was triumph and danger in equal measure. He took the champagne bottle from her unresisting fingers, set it on his desk beside their whiskey glasses, and held out his hand. Then let's begin, Miss Vale. Elena placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and firm and absolutely certain, and when he drew her toward the windows overlooking the city, she followed without hesitation. The view from 60 stories up turned the city into a map of lights and shadows, and somewhere far below, Adrian Russo was probably still laughing with Melissa about the poor girl who'd believed in fairy tales. But Elena wasn't that girl anymore. She was standing in Victor Russo's office, her hand in his, wearing a red dress that no longer felt like a costume, but like armor. And when Victor began to talk about power and perception, about leverage and loyalty, about the art of turning weakness into weapons, Elena listened with the focus of someone who'd just discovered she had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The city glittered below them like scattered diamonds, 60 stories of distance turning the noise and chaos into something almost peaceful. Elena stood at the windows of Victor Russo's office, the whiskey glass warming in her hand, and listened as he dismantled her understanding of power with the precision of a surgeon. Most people think power comes from money, Victor said, standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. They're wrong. Money is a tool, nothing more. Real power comes from understanding what people want and controlling access to it. Like you controlled access to my father's medical care, Elena said quietly. Victor's reflection in the glass showed no remorse. Exactly like that. Your father needed treatment he couldn't afford. I provided it, and in exchange I gained his loyalty and inadvertently yours. Though I'll admit, I never anticipated my investment would pay dividends quite like this. Elena turned to face him, her back against the cool glass. Is that what I am? A dividend? You're a variable I didn't account for, Victor corrected, his dark eyes tracking over her face with that same unsettling intensity, which makes you either dangerous or valuable. I prefer valuable. And if I'm not? If I'm just some angry girl who came here looking for answers? Victor's smile was sharp. Then you would have left when I offered you the whiskey. You would have taken my acknowledgement of the medical bills and walked away satisfied. But you're still here, Miss Vale, still listening, still wanting. He was right, and they both knew it. Elena took another sip of whiskey, using the burn to center herself. So teach me. You said you'd show me what real power looks like. I'm listening. Are you? Victor moved past her to his desk, pulling up something on his computer. Then let's start with the lesson in leverage. Come here. Elena crossed the office on unsteady legs. The whiskey was stronger than she'd anticipated, or maybe it was the surreality of the situation, standing in Victor Russo's office at nearly 11 at night, discussing power dynamics with a man who could destroy her with a phone call. Victor turned his monitor toward her. The screen showed a series of photographs. Adrian at various social events, always with a different woman, always with the same entitled smile. My son fancies himself a player. He thinks his conquests make him powerful. But look closer. Elena studied the images, her stomach churning. Some of the women she recognized from Adrian's social circle. Others were clearly from backgrounds similar to her own, working-class girls dressed up for nights they'd probably spent weeks planning. He has a type, she said bitterly, girls who don't know better. He has a pattern, Victor corrected, and patterns are vulnerabilities. Every woman in these photographs represents a potential liability. Angry ex-girlfriends, scorned lovers, women who could speak to his character or lack thereof. Adrian thinks he's untouchable because of his name. He doesn't understand that reputation is the most fragile form of power. Victor pulled up another screen, this one showing what looked like financial records. My son receives a monthly allowance of $50,000. He spends it on cars, clothes, bottles at clubs, and bribes to make his problems disappear. He has no real assets, no income of his own, no skills that would allow him to survive without the Russo name protecting him. Why are you showing me this? Elena asked. Because you want revenge, and revenge without strategy is just noise. Victor closed the laptop and turned to face her fully. You could expose Adrian's bet publicly, humiliate him on social media, tell your story to anyone who'll listen. Maybe it would even hurt him for a week, maybe 2. Then his lawyers would spin it, his money would smooth it over, and you'd be labeled a bitter ex-girlfriend looking for attention. The words stung because they were true. Elena had spent the walk to Russo Tower imagining exactly that kind of public exposure, that kind of dramatic confrontation. She'd wanted to hurt Adrian the way he'd hurt her. So what's the alternative, she asked. Victor's smile was predatory. You become someone he can't dismiss, someone with real power, real connections, real value. You make yourself indispensable to the people who matter in this city, and then you watch as Adrian realizes he's nothing but a name and a trust fund while you've become something he can never touch. That would take years. It would take months, Victor corrected, with the right teacher and the right motivation, which brings us back to our arrangement, Miss Vale. One night. You give me one night to show you what I'm offering, and then you decide if you want to walk away or if you want to learn how to make men like my son irrelevant. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. There was something intoxicating about the way Victor spoke, the absolute certainty in his voice, the promise of transformation. He was offering her a path from invisible waitress to someone who mattered, and all it would cost her was, "What exactly does one night entail?" she asked, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Victor held her gaze. Dinner, conversation, complete honesty about what I'm offering and what I expect in return. And if the chemistry I'm sensing between us is mutual, he let the sentence hang, unfinished but unmistakable. Elena should have been offended, should have thrown this whiskey in his face and stormed out. This was Adrian's father, a man old enough to be her own father, a dangerous man with dangerous intentions. But when Victor looked at her, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, completely, utterly seen, in a way that Adrian never had. Adrian had seen a conquest, a bet, a poor girl to practice on. Victor saw something else entirely. One night, Elena repeated, and then I can walk away? No strings, no obligations? One night, Victor confirmed. Though I have a feeling you won't want to walk away, Miss Vale. I'm very good at understanding what people need. Elena drained her whiskey glass, the burn no longer surprising. Then let's have dinner, Mr. Russo. Show me what you're offering. Victor's smile was pure satisfaction. He retrieved his phone, sent a quick text, and then extended his hand toward the door. I have a private dining room on the 58th floor. My chef keeps late hours for occasions exactly like this. The elevator ride down 2 floors felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Victor stood close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made her think of leather and smoke. He didn't touch her, but his presence filled the small space, making her hyper-aware of every breath, every heartbeat. The 58th floor opened onto a different world. Where Victor's office had been all business and intimidation, this space was designed for pleasure. Soft lighting illuminated artwork that probably cost more than Elena's apartment building, and the dining room Victor led her to featured floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, turning the city into a panoramic backdrop. A table was already set, crystal and silver and china that caught the light like captured stars. A man in chef's whites appeared from what must have been the kitchen, nodding to Victor before disappearing again. "Sit," Victor said, pulling out a chair for her. Elena sank into it, her red dress a shock of color against the neutral elegance surrounding her. Victor took the seat across from her, close enough to touch across the intimate table, and poured them both wine from a bottle that had been breathing beside the settings. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Vale," he said, his tone conversational despite the intensity in his eyes. "And don't tell me the sanitized version you'd give at a job interview. Tell me the truth. Who is Elena Vale when she's not serving coffee and pretending her dreams don't matter?" The question caught her off guard. Elena stared at him across the candlelight, trying to find the angle, the manipulation. "Why do you care?" "Because I don't invest in people I don't understand," Victor said simply. "And make no mistake, Miss Vale, if you accept what I'm offering, I'll be investing considerable time and resources into your transformation. I need to know if you're worth it." Elena bristled at being discussed like a stock option. But beneath her anger was something else, a thrill at being taken seriously, at having this powerful man's complete attention focused on her like she was a puzzle worth solving. "I grew up in Queens," she said finally. "My father worked in your warehouse until he got sick. My mother died when I was 12. Cancer. I worked my way through community college, wanted to be a teacher, but when Dad's medical bills hit, I had to drop out and pick up extra shifts." She paused, then added with deliberate edge, "I'm 23 years old. I've never been anywhere that matters, and until tonight, the most important decision I'd ever made was whether to sleep with your son." "And now?" Victor asked softly. "Now I'm having dinner with a man I've never met, drinking wine that probably costs more than my rent, and seriously considering whatever devil's bargain you're about to propose." Victor's laugh was genuine and surprised. "A devil's bargain, is that what you think this is? Isn't it?" Elena met his gaze squarely. "You're not offering to help me out of kindness. Men like you don't do anything without expecting a return on investment. So what do you really want from me, Victor?" The use of his first name made something flash in his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. "What I want," he said slowly, "is to see what happens when someone with your fire and intelligence is given real opportunities instead of being kept small by circumstance. I want to know if you're as extraordinary as I suspect, or if heartbreak is making you brave when you're usually meek." "I'm not meek," Elena said sharply. "Prove it." Victor's challenge hung in the air between them. "Tell me the worst thing you're thinking right now. The truth you're afraid to say out loud." The chef reappeared before Elena could answer, setting plates before them with practiced efficiency. The food looked like art, delicate and precise and completely intimidating. Elena stared at it, buying time, trying to decide how honest she was willing to be. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that I want to hurt your son the way he hurt me. I want him to feel small and powerless and used. I want him to know what it's like to believe in something beautiful only to discover it was all a lie." She paused, then added with brutal honesty, "And I'm thinking that sitting here with you, letting you wine me and dine me and make promises about power. It feels like the best revenge I could possibly have." Victor's smile was slow and approving. "Now we're getting somewhere. Yes, Miss Vale. Making Adrian watch while I give you everything he denied you, that would hurt him far more than any public exposure. My son has always resented me, always competed for my attention. Seeing me invest in you, seeing you thrive under my guidance while he continues to disappoint." He lifted his wine glass in a small salute. "That would destroy him." "So I'm a weapon," Elena said flatly. "You're a partner," Victor corrected. "I want to hurt my son for being a disappointment, and you want to hurt him for being cruel. Our motivations align. The difference is that I'm offering you real benefits beyond revenge. Skills, connections, opportunities, things that will matter long after Adrian is irrelevant. He leaned forward, his intensity almost overwhelming. I'm offering you a chance to become the woman you're capable of being. The woman who walked into my office tonight instead of crying in her apartment. The woman who demanded to be seen instead of accepting invisibility. Elena's pulse quickened. And in exchange? In exchange, you let me shape you, teach you, introduce you to my world. Victor paused, then added with deliberate weight, and you stay by my side while you learn, publicly, visibly, undeniably. Understanding crashed over Elena like a wave. You want me to be your, what? Your girlfriend? Your mistress? I want you to be whatever you choose to be, Victor said calmly. But yes, I want you visible at my side. At events, at dinners, in circumstances where Adrian and his crowd will see you and wonder how a waitress from Queens became Victor Russo's companion. That's insane, Elena breathed. I'm 23. You're 47, Victor supplied. Old enough to know exactly what I want and experienced enough to recognize when I found it. Age is irrelevant, Miss Vale. Power isn't. He stood, moving around the table until he was beside her chair. Elena's breath caught as he offered his hand, drawing her to her feet. This close, she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, and the heat in his gaze made something low in her belly tighten with an awareness she'd never felt with Adrian. Let me make this simple, Victor said, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. I'm attracted to you, to your fire, your defiance, your hunger for more. And unless I'm very much mistaken, you're attracted to me, or at least to what I represent. The question is whether you're brave enough to take what you want. Elena's mind raced. This was wrong on every conceivable level. Victor was Adrian's father. He was twice her age. He was dangerous and ruthless and clearly accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. But when was the last time someone had looked at her the way Victor was looking at her now? Like she mattered. Like she was worth pursuing. Like she was powerful instead of powerless. One night, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You promised me one night to decide. And you'll have it, Victor assured her. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. But I think we both know you've already decided, Elena. The question is whether you're ready to admit it. The use of her first name sent electricity down her spine. Elena's hands came up to rest against Victor's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart through expensive fabric. She should push him away. She should leave. She pulled him closer. Victor's kiss was nothing like Adrian's had been. There was no hesitation, no fumbling, no boy trying to prove himself. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing, who took control with a certainty that made Elena's knees weak. His hand tangled in her hair, careful not to pull, and his other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Elena had imagined her first kiss with real passion would be with Adrian in his bedroom, leading to the gentle loss of her virginity she'd been planning. Instead, she was being kissed breathless by his father in a private dining room 60 stories above the city, and it felt like awakening. When Victor finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with desire and satisfaction. Still want to walk away after tonight? Elena's laugh was shaky. I haven't decided yet. Liar. Victor's smile was knowing. He released her slowly, giving her space to breathe, to think. Finish your dinner, Elena. Then we'll talk about what happens next. They returned to their seats, but the atmosphere had changed. The tension between them was no longer just possibility. It was inevitability. Elena picked at her food, her appetite overwhelmed by the enormity of what she was considering. Tell me what you know about my business, Victor said, and Elena was grateful for the shift to safer territory. Real estate development, she answered. Property management. You own half the commercial buildings in the city and several residential developments. You started with nothing and built an empire. She paused, then added carefully, and there are rumors about how you built it, about connections to people who don't operate within legal boundaries. Victor's expression didn't change. And those rumors concern you? They should, Elena admitted, but right now I'm too angry to care about should. Good, Victor said, surprising her. Because the truth is more complicated than rumors ever are. Yes, I've made deals with dangerous people. Yes, I've operated in gray areas. But everything I own, I built through strategy and intelligence, not violence. I'm not a saint, Elena, but I'm not the monster the tabloids like to paint me as either. Why are you telling me this? Because if you accept my offer, you'll be associated with me publicly. You'll hear the whispers, face the judgment, deal with people who think you're nothing but a gold digger trading your youth for my money. Victor's gaze held hers. I need to know if you're strong enough to handle that. If your desire for power outweighs your need for approval. Elena thought about her father fighting for his life in a hospital bed, saved by Victor's money. She thought about her neighbors in Queens who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make rent. She thought about 6 months of believing Adrian's lies, of being invisible and powerless and small. I don't need approval, she said quietly. I need to never be helpless again. Victor's smile was pure triumph. Then let's discuss terms. If you agree to this arrangement, here's what I'm offering. First, a position in my company. Nothing ornamental, real work, real responsibilities, real opportunity to prove yourself. You'll start in property management, learn the business from the ground up. I'll personally oversee your training. Elena's heart raced. That's more than I expected. I told you I don't invest in people I don't believe in. Second, you'll move out of Queens. I own several apartments in the city. You can choose one. Furnished, secure, appropriate for someone in your new position. I can't afford part of your compensation package, Victor interrupted smoothly. Consider it a signing bonus. Third, you'll need a new wardrobe, professional clothes, evening wear for events. I'll provide an allowance and connect you with someone who can help you develop your own style. Elena's head spun. This sounds like you're trying to buy me. I'm investing in you, Victor corrected. There's a difference. Everything I'm offering serves a dual purpose. It helps you and it serves my interests. You become someone worth noticing, someone who makes Adrian question everything he thought he knew about power and worth. And in the process, I get a protege who might actually have the intelligence and drive my son lacks. What about the other part? Elena forced herself to ask. The personal arrangement. Victor studied her for a long moment. That's entirely your choice. I'm attracted to you, I've made that clear. But I'm not interested in forcing anything. If all you want is professional development and revenge, I can work with that. But if you want more, he let the invitation hang between them. Elena's mind raced. What did she want? 12 hours ago, she'd wanted to give her virginity to Adrian Russo, to cement their relationship, to believe in love. Now she was contemplating something far more complicated. A relationship with a man who saw her as an investment, who offered power instead of promises, who made no pretense of fairy tales. I don't know what I want, she admitted. Everything's happened so fast. This morning I was planning a romantic evening, and now I'm sitting here discussing terms of employment and living arrangements with my ex-boyfriend's father. Then take time to think, Victor said reasonably. The job offer stands regardless of anything else. You can start Monday, move into an apartment, begin building a legitimate career. The personal component is separate, something we can explore if and when you're ready. It was a reasonable offer, a generous offer. So why did Elena feel like she was still missing something? What's the catch? She asked bluntly. There's always a catch. Victor's laugh was low and approving. Smart girl, yes, there's a catch. If you accept this, you're mine, professionally, publicly, completely. You don't date other men without my approval. You don't make major decisions without consulting me. You don't embarrass me or the company. And most importantly, you give me your loyalty. Not your love, not your devotion, your loyalty. Everything else is negotiable. The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, it sent a thrill down Elena's spine. That's a lot of control to hand over to someone I just met. It's the cost of transformation, Victor said simply. You can't become powerful while clinging to old patterns of independence. Power requires discipline, structure, trust. I'm offering to rebuild you, Elena, but I can't do that if you're constantly questioning my decisions or maintaining escape routes. He leaned forward, his intensity overwhelming. Here's what I need you to understand. I don't fail. When I commit to something, I see it through to success. If I commit to making you powerful, you will become powerful. But only if you trust me completely. Elena stared at him across the candlelight, trying to find the manipulation, the lie, the angle. But Victor's expression held only certainty, the absolute confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing and knew exactly what he was capable of. I need time, she said finally. This is too much to decide tonight. You have until Monday, Victor said. That gives you 3 days to think, to research me, to consider your options. On Monday morning, you either show up at my office ready to begin, or you walk away and we never speak of this again. And if I walk away? Then I'll respect your decision and wish you well, Victor said, and Elena almost believed him. But you won't walk away, Elena. You're too hungry for what I'm offering, too angry at the world that made you invisible, too smart to pass up the opportunity to become everything Adrian thought you could never be. He stood, extending his hand to help her up. Let me take you home. Give you time to think in familiar surroundings. The return to reality was jarring. Suddenly, Elena was being escorted to the elevator, Victor's hand on the small of her back proprietary and warm. The ride down to the lobby happened in silence, charged with possibility, and then they were stepping out into the night air where a black car waited at the curb. Victor opened the door for her himself. Where in Queens? Elena gave him her address, hyper-aware of how shabby it must sound after the luxury of Russo Tower. But Victor's expression didn't change as he relayed the information to his driver before sliding into the back seat beside her. The partition between them and the driver rose with a soft hum, creating privacy. Elena stared out the window as the city rolled past, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 3 hours. She'd gone from planning to lose her virginity to discovering heartbreak to negotiating a devil's bargain with one of the most powerful men in the city. Regrets? Victor asked softly. Elena turned to look at him. In the dim light of the car's interior, he looked dangerous and compelling, and nothing like a savior. Ask me Monday. Victor's smile was satisfied. Fair enough. They didn't speak again until the car pulled up outside Elena's building, a 6-story walk-up with faded brick and a door that never quite locked properly. Elena reached for the handle, but Victor's hand on her arm stopped her. One more thing, he said, and before she could respond, he was kissing her again. This kiss was slower, deeper, a promise and a warning in equal measure. When he pulled back, Elena's pulse was racing and her thoughts were scattered. Think about what I'm offering, Victor said against her lips. Think about power instead of love, strategy instead of fairy tales, becoming someone no one can ignore instead of staying invisible, and then decide if you're brave enough to take it. He released her, and Elena stumbled out of the car on shaking legs. She watched the black sedan pull away, Victor's silhouette visible through the tinted windows, and wondered what the hell she'd just agreed to consider. Her apartment felt smaller than ever when she finally climbed the stairs. The red dress that had felt like armor in Victor's office now just felt tired. Elena stripped it off, threw it in the corner, and collapsed onto her bed. Her phone lit up with notifications. Texts from Melissa, calls from Adrian, messages from friends asking where she'd disappeared to. Elena ignored them all. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment of the past 3 hours. Victor's hands on her face, his absolute certainty, his promise to make her powerful, the kiss that had felt nothing like love and everything like destiny. Monday was 3 days away. 72 hours to decide if she was brave enough to trade fairy tales for power, to step into Victor Russo's world and let him remake her into something new. Elena closed her eyes and saw Victor's smile, heard his voice promising transformation, felt his kiss branded against her lips. She already knew what her answer would be. But she'd make him wait until Monday anyway. The weekend passed in a strange suspension of reality. Elena called in sick to the diner, the first time in 3 years she'd missed a shift without a legitimate emergency. Her manager hadn't been pleased, but Elena found she didn't care. The girl who would have apologized profusely and promised to make it up no longer existed. She spent Saturday morning visiting her father at the rehabilitation center, where he was recovering from his final round of treatment. Thomas Vale looked better than he had in months, color returning to his face, strength rebuilding in his limbs. He smiled when he saw her, reaching for her hand with fingers that no longer trembled. "There's my girl," he said warmly. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about your old man." Elena settled into the chair beside his bed, guilt twisting in her chest. She'd been so consumed with Adrian, with work, with trying to hold their lives together that her visits had become sporadic. Never. "How are you feeling?" "Strong enough to be bored," Thomas admitted. "The doctors say I can go home next week. Back to work in a month if I take it easy." He squeezed her hand. "Thanks to you, sweetheart. I know how hard you've been working to keep us afloat." Elena's throat tightened. Her father thought she'd sacrificed everything for him, and she had in a way. But he didn't know about Adrian's lies, about the money that had actually saved him, about the choice she was facing. "Dad," she said carefully, What would you say if I told you I had a chance at a better job? Something in corporate property management with real opportunities for advancement. Thomas's expression shifted to cautious hope. I'd say that sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? It's with Russo Properties, Elena said, watching his face carefully. Victor Russo offered me a position. Her father's eyebrows rose. Victor Russo? The man who paid my medical bills? At Elena's nod, he continued, How did that happen? Elena had prepared her story carefully. I went to thank him for helping us. And we got talking about my background, my experience, and he mentioned they had an opening. The lies came easier than she'd expected. He said he likes to invest in people who remind him of where he came from. It wasn't entirely false. Victor had said something similar, even if the context had been completely different. Thomas studied her with the same sharp attention that had made him a good warehouse supervisor before illness had stolen his strength. This wouldn't have anything to do with that boyfriend of yours, would it? Adrian Russo? Elena's stomach dropped. What do you mean? I'm sick, not stupid, Elena. You've been dating the boss's son for months. Now suddenly, his father is offering you a dream job? Thomas shook his head. I don't like it. Feels like you're getting pulled into something complicated. Adrian and I broke up, Elena said, and it felt good to say it out loud. Last night. It's over. Her father's expression softened with concern. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, Elena said, and meant it. He wasn't who I thought he was. And this job, Dad, it's real. It's a chance to be more than a waitress, to build something that matters. Isn't that worth taking a risk? Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his thumb rubbing across her knuckles in the absent gesture she'd known her whole life. Just promise me something, he said finally. Promise me you're doing this for yourself, not because you feel obligated to Victor Russo for helping me. You don't owe anyone your future, Elena. Not him, not me, not anyone. Elena leaned forward and kissed her father's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave. I promise, Dad. This is my choice. She left the rehabilitation center with her father's blessing and spent the rest of Saturday researching Victor Russo with the thoroughness of someone whose life depended on understanding who she was dealing with. The internet offered a mixture of fact and speculation, business success stories tangled with rumors of mob connections, charity donations alongside whispers of ruthless corporate takeovers, photos of Victor at high society events with beautiful women on his arm who never appeared more than once. The message was clear. Victor Russo took what he wanted and discarded what no longer served him. Elena should have found that terrifying. Instead, she found it clarifying. It was the lies that destroyed you. Sunday, not fairy tales. She could work with honesty, even brutal honesty. It was the lies that destroyed you. Sunday brought complications in the form of Adrian. Elena was leaving the corner bodega with coffee and groceries when she saw him leaning against a silver Porsche parked illegally at the curb. He wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky and had his arms crossed in a posture she'd once found attractive but now just looked petulant. We need to talk, Adrian said as she approached. Elena's grip tightened on her grocery bag. I have nothing to say to you. Elena, come on. Adrian pushed off the car, reaching for her arm. Let me explain about Friday night. What you heard. It wasn't what it sounded like. Elena jerked away from his touch, her voice cold. It was exactly what it sounded like. You and Melissa, laughing about how I was just a bet, how poor girls are desperate for attention from rich boys, how tonight you were going to take my virginity to win $5,000. Adrian's face paled beneath his expensive tan. You heard that? Every word, Elena confirmed. I was standing outside your bedroom with champagne and an idiotic belief that you actually cared about me. So thank you, Adrian, for teaching me what I was really worth to you. Nothing. That's not true, Adrian said, and he actually had the audacity to sound wounded. Elena, I care about you, the bet. That was just stupid guy talk. It didn't mean anything. Which part didn't mean anything? Elena's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. The part where you called me easy? The part where you said I was good for practice? Or the part where you were fucking my best friend while I was planning to give you my virginity? Several people on the street had stopped to watch. Adrian noticed, his expression shifting from apologetic to annoyed. Can we not do this in public? Get in the car. Let's go somewhere private and talk this through like adults. No. The word felt powerful, final. We're done, Adrian. Whatever you thought we had, whatever game you were playing, it's over. You're upset, Adrian said, his tone shifting to patronizing. I get it, but you're overreacting. Come on, Elena. You know we're good together. Don't throw away 6 months over a stupid misunderstanding. Elena stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the entitled boy beneath the handsome facade. He actually believed she'd forgive him, actually thought his charm and money could smooth over the cruelty of what he'd done. I'm not throwing away 6 months, she said quietly. You did that when you decided I was worth less than a bet, when you used my father's illness as leverage, when you chose Melissa over honesty. Fine, Adrian snapped, his mask slipping completely. Be that way. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you're giving up. Girls like you don't get many chances with guys like me, Elena. You'll regret this. Elena smiled, and it felt like vengeance. Actually, Adrian, I already have a better offer, from someone who sees me as more than practice. She walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Behind her, she heard Adrian call her name, heard him demand she explain what she meant, but Elena didn't look back. She was done giving Adrian Russo her attention. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Elena stood in front of her closet at 6 a.m., staring at clothes that suddenly felt wrong. Everything she owned screamed struggling waitress, cheap fabrics, dated styles, nothing that belonged in Victor Russo's world. She settled on the most professional outfit she had, black slacks from a discount store and a white blouse that almost fit properly. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked nervous and underdressed, but determination burned in her eyes. She was doing this. She was choosing power over safety, transformation over comfort. The subway ride to Russo Tower felt surreal. Elena watched the stops pass, aware that she was traveling from one life to another, that the girl who got off at the Wall Street station wouldn't be the same one who'd gotten on in Queens. Victor's assistant was waiting in the lobby when Elena arrived at 8:30. The older woman introduced herself as Margaret and led Elena through security with practiced efficiency. Mr. Russo is expecting you, Margaret said as they rode the elevator to the 60th floor. He has meetings all morning, but he wanted to see you first. Elena's palms were sweating. She wiped them discreetly on her slacks as the elevator doors opened onto the now familiar private lobby. Margaret knocked once on Victor's office door before opening it. Victor stood at his windows, his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in rapid Italian, his tone sharp with command, and he didn't turn as Margaret gestured for Elena to enter. Sit, Margaret mouthed, pointing to the chairs across from Victor's desk before disappearing. Elena sat, her hands clasped in her lap, trying not to feel like a student called to the principal's office. She studied Victor's profile as he continued his call, the strong line of his jaw, the silver threading through his dark hair, the expensive cut of his suit. In daylight, he was even more imposing than he'd been Friday night. Victor ended his call abruptly and turned to face her. His dark eyes tracked over her appearance, missing nothing, and Elena fought the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. You came, he said simply. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you were smart enough to see the risks and brave enough to take them anyway. Victor moved to his desk, leaning against it with casual authority. But hope and certainty are different things. I'm pleased you chose certainty. Elena lifted her chin. I haven't agreed to anything yet. I'm here to discuss terms. Victor's smile was approving. Good. Never accept the first offer without negotiation. What terms do you want to discuss? The question caught Elena off guard. She'd expected Victor to dictate conditions, not invite her input. She scrambled to organize her thoughts. The job, you said property management, but I want specifics. What would I actually be doing? Learning, Victor said bluntly. For the first month, you'll shadow my senior property manager, Diane Chen. You'll attend client meetings, review contracts, understand how we evaluate and acquire properties. You'll work long hours, you'll be challenged constantly, and you'll probably question your decision daily. And after the first month? If you prove yourself, you'll take on smaller properties independently, residential buildings, commercial spaces that need hands-on management. You'll deal with tenants, contractors, financial reporting, real responsibility with real consequences if you fail. Elena's pulse quickened. What's the salary? $70,000 to start, Victor said, and Elena's breath caught. That was more than triple what she made at the diner. Plus benefits, the apartment I mentioned, and a clothing allowance to ensure you look the part. After 6 months, if you're performing well, we'll renegotiate. It was more than generous. It was life-changing. Elena tried to find the catch, the hidden clause that would trap her. And the personal arrangement? You said that was separate. Victor pushed off from his desk, closing the distance between them. He stopped just inside her personal space, close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. It is separate. The job is yours regardless of whether anything else develops between us. I'm a bastard, Elena, but I'm not a predator. I don't condition employment on sexual favors. Then why bring it up at all? Elena challenged. Because I'm attracted to you and I think you're attracted to me, and I see no reason to pretend otherwise. Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone in an echo of Friday night. But what happens between us personally is entirely your choice. You can work here, learn from me, build your career, and never let me touch you again. Or you can explore what this chemistry between us might become. Either way, you're still employed. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. That doesn't sound like you. Everything I've read about you suggests you always mix business and pleasure. Everything you've read about me is either tabloid speculation or carefully crafted public relations, Victor corrected. The truth is more complicated. Yes, I've had relationships with women in my professional circle, but I've never coerced anyone, never used employment as leverage for sex. Those women made their choices freely, as you'll make yours. He released her face and stepped back, giving her space to breathe. Here's what I'm proposing. Take the job. Move into the apartment. Learn the business. Let's see who you become when you're not struggling to survive. And if, in a few weeks or months, you decide you want more than a professional relationship, we'll discuss it then. But I'm not pressuring you, Elena. I'm giving you room to choose. It was exactly what Elena needed to hear. The tension that had knotted her shoulders since Friday night began to loosen. This she could work with, clear boundaries, explicit expectations, room to make decisions without feeling trapped. Okay, she said. I accept. The job, the apartment, the chance to learn, but nothing personal until I'm ready. Agreed. Victor extended his hand formally, and Elena shook it. His grip was warm and firm, and somehow felt like sealing a pact with the devil himself. Welcome to Russo Properties, Miss Vale. Try not to disappoint me. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of paperwork, introductions, and information overload. Margaret walked Elena through HR processes with efficient kindness, explaining benefits and policies in terms Elena mostly understood. Then she was handed off to Diane Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked Elena up and down with frank assessment. So you're Victor's new project, Diane said without preamble. Let me give you some advice. Work twice as hard as anyone else, and never give him reason to regret hiring you. Victor Russo doesn't believe in second chances. Elena bristled at being called a project, but she kept her voice level. I don't plan on needing second chances. Diane's smile was thin. Good. Then let's get started. The week that followed was brutal. Elena arrived at the office by 7 each morning and rarely left before 8 at night. Diane threw her into the deep end immediately. Client meetings where Elena took notes frantically, site visits to properties in various states of disrepair, contract reviews that made her head spin with legal terminology she didn't understand. Every evening, Diane would quiz her on what she'd learned, pointing out mistakes with ruthless precision. Elena went home to her tiny apartment in Queens, exhausted and overwhelmed, questioning whether she was capable of surviving in Victor's world. But she didn't quit. Every morning she dragged herself onto the subway. Every day she pushed through the exhaustion. Every night she studied the materials Diane assigned until her eyes burned. Victor was a constant presence, though he rarely spoke to her directly. She'd catch glimpses of him in the building, striding through the lobby with an entourage, taking calls in his office with the door open, commanding rooms with his mere presence. Once she looked up during a particularly tedious contract review to find him watching her through the glass walls of the conference room, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met for a long moment. Then Victor nodded once, approval or acknowledgement, she couldn't tell, and disappeared down the hallway. Friday evening, Diane dismissed her early. Go home. Rest. Monday we're visiting a potential acquisition in Brooklyn, and I need you sharp. Elena had intended to go home, but she found herself riding the elevator to the 60th floor instead, her exhausted body moving on autopilot. Victor's office door stood open, warm light spilling into the lobby. She knocked on the doorframe. Victor looked up from his laptop, surprise flickering across his face. Elena. What are you still doing here? I wanted to thank you, she said, stepping into the office. For the opportunity. For believing I could do this even when I wasn't sure I could. Victor studied her, taking in the exhaustion that must be written across her face, the rumpled state of her clothes after a long week. Diane's been working you hard. She thinks I'm your project, Elena said. Something to prove myself worthy of. And what do you think you are? Elena moved closer to his desk, drawn by the warmth in his voice, the genuine interest in his eyes. I think I'm someone who's tired of being invisible. Someone who's willing to work until her hands bleed if it means becoming someone who matters. Your hands are bleeding? Victor's voice sharpened with concern. Elena looked down at her palms, surprised to see that she'd been clenching her fists so hard her nails had left crescent marks in her skin. Figure of speech. Victor stood, rounding his desk with purposeful strides. He took her hands in his, examining them with unexpected gentleness. You're pushing yourself too hard. You said to work twice as hard as anyone else, Elena protested. I said Diane would expect that, Victor corrected. I expect you to be smart enough to know your limits. He released one of her hands to tip her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. This isn't a sprint, Elena. It's a marathon. You have to pace yourself. The concern in his voice undid something in Elena's carefully maintained composure. Suddenly she was aware of how tired she was, how overwhelming the week had been, how much she'd been running on determination and caffeine alone. I don't know how to pace myself, she admitted. I only know how to survive. Working extra shifts, sleeping 4 hours a night, pushing through exhaustion, that's been my life for years. I don't know how to do this differently. Victor's expression softened. Then let me teach you. That's part of what I'm offering, Elena. Not just business skills, but life skills. How to delegate, how to trust, how to build something sustainable instead of burning yourself out. He guided her to the leather couch against the far wall, settling beside her close enough that their thighs touched. Elena should have pulled away, should have maintained professional distance, but she was too tired to care. Tell me about your week, Victor said. What did you learn? Elena found herself talking about the properties she'd visited, the clients she'd met, the contracts that made no sense, the thousand small humiliations of not knowing the language everyone else spoke fluently. Victor listened without interrupting, his presence solid and grounding. You're doing well, he said when she finally ran out of words. Better than I expected for your first week. Diane's report was glowing, though she'd die before admitting it to you. Really? Elena turned to face him, hope blooming in her chest. Really? She said you're quick to learn, attentive to detail, and not afraid to ask questions when you don't understand something. Those are exactly the qualities I value. Victor's hand found hers again, his fingers tangling with hers in a gesture that felt both intimate and natural. You're going to succeed at this, Elena. I have no doubt. The conviction in his voice steadied something in Elena's chest. She looked at their joined hands, then up at Victor's face. The strong features, the intelligent eyes, the mouth that had kissed her with such devastating certainty. I saw Adrian this week, she said quietly. He came to my apartment Sunday, wanted to apologize, to explain away what I heard. Victor's expression hardened. What did you tell him? That we were done. That I already had a better offer from someone who saw me as more than practice. Elena smiled at the memory. He didn't take it well. No, I imagine he didn't. Victor's thumb stroked across her knuckles. Has he tried to contact you since? Texts, calls. I've been ignoring them. Elena paused, then asked the question that had been nagging at her all week. Does he know I'm working here? Not yet, but he will soon enough. The company's not that large. News travels. Victor's smile was sharp. How do you think he'll react? Badly, Elena predicted. He'll either assume I'm sleeping with you or accuse me of using him to get close to you. Either way, he'll find some narrative that makes him the victim. Let him, Victor said dismissively. Adrian's opinion ceased to matter the moment you walked out of his life. The question is whether you're prepared for the fallout. People will talk, Elena. They'll make assumptions about how you got this job, about what you're doing to keep it. Are you strong enough to ignore that? Elena thought about her father's warning, about the whispers she'd already heard in the office, about the way some of Victor's employees looked at her like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. I don't have a choice. I can't go back to being invisible. Not after this week. Not after seeing what's possible. Good answer. Victor released her hand and stood, offering to pull her to her feet. Come on, I'm taking you to dinner. That's not necessary. It's necessary, Victor interrupted firmly. You've worked 12-hour days all week. You're running on fumes, and you need a proper meal and decent conversation that isn't about property contracts. Consider it part of your training, learning how to accept help when it's offered. Elena found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. Is that an order, Mr. Russo? It's a strongly worded suggestion, Miss Vale. Victor's eyes gleamed with amusement, though I'm not above making it an order if needed. They took Victor's car to a restaurant Elena had never heard of, the kind of place without prices on the menu where everyone seemed to know Victor by name. The maitre d' seated them at a private table near the windows, and Victor ordered for both of them in fluid Italian that made something warm curl in Elena's stomach. Show off, she murmured when the waiter departed. Victor's smile was unrepentant. I spent 10 years in Italy building my first properties. The language stuck. He poured them both wine from a bottle Elena suspected cost more than her weekly paycheck. Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with work or my son. Something real. Elena considered the question while sipping wine that tasted like sunshine and earth. My mother used to take me to the library every Saturday, she said finally. We'd spend hours there, her reading romance novels while I worked through the children's section. After she died, I kept going alone. It was the only place that felt safe. What did you read? Everything. Fantasy, adventure, mysteries, stories about girls who became queens and boys who became heroes. Elena's smile was bittersweet. I think that's why Adrian's lies hurt so much. I'd spent my whole life reading about love and magic and transformation. I wanted to believe in it. And now? Victor asked softly. Now I think transformation comes from strategy, not magic, and power is more valuable than love. Victor was quiet for a moment, studying her across the candlelight. You're wrong about that. Elena's eyebrows rose. I am? Power and love aren't mutually exclusive, Victor said. The most dangerous people in the world are the ones who have both, who love something enough to protect it with everything they've built. Love makes you vulnerable, yes, but it also makes you fierce in ways power alone never can. It was the most personal thing Victor had said to her, and Elena found herself leaning forward, desperate to understand this man who'd offered her everything except promises. Who do you love? She asked. Victor's smile was sad. I loved my wife. She died 15 years ago, cancer, like your mother. And I love my daughter, though I rarely see her. She lives in Italy with her grandparents, wants nothing to do with my world. His gaze held Elena's. And I'm beginning to think I could love you, if you let me. Elena's breath caught. Victor, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Just stating a fact. You walked into my office a week ago wearing a red dress and carrying cheap champagne, and something in you called to something in me. Recognition, maybe, or possibility. I don't know yet, but I wanted you to know that this, he gestured between them, isn't just strategy for me. You're not just a tool to hurt my son or a project to prove my skills. You matter, Elena, to me, as a person. Elena's eyes stung with unexpected tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll give us, a real chance, Victor said. Not tonight, not even soon, but eventually. When you're ready. When you've become whoever you're going to become, and you know your own worth. Say you'll consider letting me in. Elena reached across the table, covering Victor's hand with hers. I'll consider it. That's all I can promise right now. It's enough, Victor said, and his smile was warm and genuine and entirely too dangerous for Elena's peace of mind. They finished dinner talking about everything except the enormous thing hanging between them, the possibility of more, the risk of trust, the terrifying potential of letting someone see you completely. When Victor drove her home to Queens, he walked her to her door like a gentleman. But before Elena could disappear inside, he caught her wrist and pulled her back for a kiss that tasted like wine and promise. Sleep well, Elena, he murmured against her lips. Monday, we start building your empire. Elena watched his car disappear down the street, her fingers pressed to her lips, her heart racing with equal parts terror and anticipation. She was in so much trouble, and she'd never felt more alive. The apartment Victor provided was in Tribeca, on the 14th floor of a converted warehouse with views of the Hudson River that made Elena's breath catch every time she looked out the windows. She moved in 3 weeks after starting at Russo Properties, leaving behind her cramped studio in Queens with a mixture of relief and vertigo. The space was 3 times the size of her old apartment, with exposed brick walls, hardwood floors that gleamed in the morning light, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Elena walked through the rooms touching everything, trying to convince herself this was real. The king-sized bed with its cloud-soft mattress, the kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use, the bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in. Margaret had helped coordinate the move, arranging for movers and ensuring Elena's few possessions didn't look too shabby against the apartment's elegance. The older woman had also taken Elena shopping, guiding her through stores where a single dress cost more than Elena used to make in a month. "Mr. Russo wants you to look the part," Margaret had said, steering Elena toward tailored suits and silk blouses. "Professional but distinctive. You need to command attention when you walk into a room." Elena had protested the expense until Margaret fixed her with a look that brooked no argument. "This is an investment in your career, Miss Vale. Mr. Russo doesn't make investments he doesn't believe in. Stop questioning his judgment and start trusting it." Now, standing in her new apartment wearing one of those expensive suits, Elena barely recognized herself in the floor-length mirror. The woman staring back at her looked polished, confident, powerful. She looked like someone who belonged in Victor Russo's world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Client meeting at 9. Don't be late. Address attached." Elena grabbed her new leather portfolio, another gift from Victor that she'd stopped protesting, and headed out into the morning that felt full of promise and danger in equal measure. The client meeting was at a commercial property in Midtown, a 12-story building that had seen better decades. Diane was already there when Elena arrived, talking with an older man in an expensive suit who looked at the building like it personally offended him. "Elena, this is Richard Chen, potential buyer," Diane said briskly. "Richard, my associate Elena Vale. She'll be handling the property assessment." Elena's stomach dropped. She'd observed dozens of assessments, but she'd never conducted one independently. Diane's expression offered no sympathy, only expectation. "A pleasure, Miss Vale," Richard said, shaking her hand with a grip that tested her confidence. "I'm told you're one of Victor Russo's rising stars. Let's see if the reputation is deserved." The next 2 hours were brutal. Elena walked through every floor of the building, documenting structural issues, noting code violations, calculating renovation costs while Richard peppered her with questions designed to expose any weakness in her knowledge. Diane observed silently, offering no help, no guidance, nothing but the weight of her judgment. Elena's hands shook as she compiled her notes, but her voice remained steady. She'd learned enough in 3 weeks to fake confidence, to speak the language of property valuation even when she wasn't entirely sure of her conclusions. "The building has good bones," she said finally, standing in the lobby with Richard and Diane. "But you're looking at minimum $2 million in renovations to bring it up to code. Plumbing needs complete replacement, electrical system is outdated, and the roof has maybe 2 years before it fails completely." Richard's eyebrows rose. "That's higher than the estimate I was given." "The previous estimate was based on cosmetic renovations only," Elena said, pulling up photos on her tablet to support her assessment. "But if you're planning to lease to corporate tenants, they'll require modern infrastructure. You can't hide old plumbing behind fresh paint." Diane's lips curved in something that might have been approval. Richard studied Elena with new interest. "Smart," he said. "Most people in your position would lowball the estimate to make the sale look better. Why didn't you?" "Because Mr. Russo taught me that reputation matters more than any single transaction," Elena replied. "If I lie to you about renovation costs and you discover the truth later, you'll never trust Russo properties again. But if I'm honest now, even if it means losing this sale, you'll remember that integrity when the next opportunity comes along." Richard laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and respect. Victor always did know how to pick talent. "All right, Miss Vale. I'll take your assessment seriously. Send me the full report by Friday." After he left, Diane turned to Elena with an expression that was almost warm. "That was well done. You didn't panic, you didn't defer to me, and you gave him honesty instead of salesmanship. Victor will be pleased." "I wasn't sure about the plumbing estimate," Elena admitted. "You were within 10% of the actual cost," Diane said, "which is better than some people who've been doing this for years. You have good instincts, Elena. Trust them more." The praise made Elena's chest tight with pride and relief. She was succeeding. Against all odds, despite her lack of experience, she was actually succeeding. That success came crashing down 2 days later when Adrian finally discovered where she worked. Elena was at her desk reviewing contracts when she heard the commotion in the lobby. Raised voices, Margaret's firm tone trying to establish control, and then a voice she recognized cutting through the professional atmosphere like a knife. "I don't care if he's in a meeting. I'm his son. He'll see me." Elena's blood ran cold. She looked up to see Adrian striding through the office, his face flushed with anger, his expensive suit rumpled like he'd slept in it. Employees scrambled out of his path and Margaret followed helplessly behind, her phone pressed to her ear. Adrian's gaze locked on Elena. "You." Elena stood slowly, hyper-aware of every eye in the office, tracking this confrontation. "Adrian, this isn't a good time." "This isn't a good time?" Adrian's laugh was harsh. "You're working for my father. You're living in one of his buildings. And you didn't think to mention any of this when I tried to apologize?" "We're not having this conversation here," Elena said quietly, moving toward the conference room. But Adrian grabbed her wrist, his grip tight enough to hurt. "We're having this conversation right now," he snarled. "How long have you been fucking him, Elena? Was it before or after you found out about the bet? Did you come crying to Daddy looking for revenge?" Elena jerked free, her voice sharp. "Let go of me." "Mr. Russo." Victor's voice cut through the office like a blade. He stood in the doorway of his office, his expression carved from ice. "Take your hands off my employee. Now." Adrian turned and something ugly twisted across his face. "Your employee. Is that what we're calling her? Because everyone in this office knows exactly what she is, Dad. She's a gold-digging little—" "Finish that sentence and you'll regret it," Victor said, his voice deadly soft. He moved forward with the controlled grace of a predator, and Adrian actually took a step back. "Elena works here because she has skills I value and intelligence I respect. What she is not is any business of yours." "She's my ex-girlfriend," Adrian protested. "She's someone you lied to, manipulated, and planned to use for a bet," Victor said coldly. "Which means you have exactly zero claim on her time, her attention, or her choices. Now get out of my office before I have security remove you." Father and son stared at each other, the air crackling with tension. Elena saw the exact moment Adrian realized he'd lost. His shoulders sagged, his face crumpled, and underneath the anger she glimpsed something that looked like genuine hurt. "I loved her," Adrian said quietly. "Maybe not at first, but somewhere along the way, I actually fell for her. And you just took her. Like you take everything." "I didn't take anything," Victor said, but his tone had softened fractionally. "Elena made her own choice. If you treated her with respect instead of cruelty, maybe she would have chosen differently." Adrian's gaze swung back to Elena, and she saw the question in his eyes. The small, desperate hope that maybe Victor was wrong, that maybe there was still a chance. "I'm sorry," Elena said, and meant it. "For how this happened, for the hurt. But I'm not sorry for choosing to work here. I'm not sorry for choosing myself over you." Adrian flinched like she'd slapped him. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the office, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The office remained frozen for a long moment. Then Victor's voice cracked like a whip. "Everyone back to work. Show's over." Activity resumed with forced normalcy. Victor gestured for Elena to follow him into his office. She did, her legs shaking, adrenaline making her hands tremble. Victor closed the door and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Elena said automatically. "That's a lie, but we'll come back to it." Victor moved to his bar, poured 2 glasses of whiskey despite the early hour, and handed her one. "Drink. You look like you need it." Elena took a long swallow, the burn centering her scattered thoughts. "I'm sorry. I didn't know he was going to show up like that." "You have nothing to apologize for," Victor said firmly. "Adrian was out of line. The way he spoke to you, the way he grabbed you, that's unacceptable." "He looked hurt," Elena said quietly, "like he actually cared." "Adrian cares about his ego," Victor said dismissively. "He cares that you chose me over him, that you're succeeding where he expected you to fail. Don't mistake wounded pride for genuine emotion." Elena wanted to believe him, but something in Adrian's eyes had looked genuine. She'd spent 6 months learning to read him, and the hurt she'd seen had been real, even if the love that caused it was complicated. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Victor finished his whiskey and set the glass down with deliberate care. "Now the entire office knows there's history between you and Adrian. They're going to make assumptions, spread rumors, question your qualifications. You need to decide if you're strong enough to weather that. And if I'm not? Victor's smile was sharp. Then I severely misjudged you, which rarely happens. But I don't think you'll fold, Elena. I think you're going to walk back out there with your head high and prove that you deserve to be here regardless of who you used to date. He was right, and they both knew it. Elena straightened her shoulders, smoothed her suit, and met Victor's gaze squarely. Diane wanted the property assessment report by end of day. I should get back to work. That's my girl, Victor said, and the pride in his voice made Elena's chest warm. She walked back to her desk with measured steps, aware of covert glances and whispered conversations. Let them talk. Let them speculate. She had work to do, skills to master, an empire to learn. The whispers followed her for days. Elena heard fragments of conversations that stopped when she approached, saw the knowing looks exchanged between employees who thought they understood her story. She was sleeping with the boss. She'd seduced Victor to get revenge on Adrian. She was a social climber using her body to buy access to power. None of it was true, but Elena had learned that truth mattered less than perception. So she worked harder, arrived earlier, stayed later, and proved through sheer competence that she deserved her position. Diane became an unexpected ally. The older woman started introducing Elena as one of our most promising analysts instead of Victor's new project, and she made sure Elena was included in high-level meetings where her insights could be heard. 3 weeks after Adrian's confrontation, Diane called Elena into her office with an expression Elena had learned meant opportunity and challenge in equal measure. We have a problem property in Brooklyn, Diane said, pulling up photos on her computer. 6-unit residential building, rent-controlled tenants, structural issues the previous owner ignored. It's bleeding money, and Victor wants someone to turn it around. I'm giving it to you. Elena's stomach dropped. That's a huge responsibility. It's a test, Diane corrected bluntly. Victor wants to know if you can handle independent management. You'll have a budget, access to contractors, and complete authority to make decisions. But if you fail, if the property continues losing money, or we lose tenants, or you make costly mistakes, that's on you. When do I start? Diane's smile was approving. Tomorrow. The current building manager is retiring, so you'll be stepping into an existing relationship with tenants who don't trust the company. Your first job is to earn that trust while fixing the building's problems within budget. Elena spent that night researching the property, studying tenant histories, mapping out renovation priorities. The building was in Sunset Park, a neighborhood she knew from her Queens childhood. Working-class families, immigrants building lives, people who couldn't afford to be displaced by rising rents. She understood these tenants in a way her expensive education couldn't teach. She'd been them just months ago, worried about rent, stretching every dollar, one emergency away from disaster. Her first day at the building confirmed her fears. The tenants were hostiles, suspicious of any representative from Russo Properties. An older woman named Mrs. Rodriguez spoke for the group, her arms crossed and her expression hard. We know what happens when companies like yours take over, Mrs. Rodriguez said in accented English. You fix up the building, raise the rents, push out families who've lived here for decades. So whatever lies you're here to tell us, save your breath. Elena met the woman's gaze steadily. I'm not here to lie to you. I'm here to fix the problems the previous owner ignored and make this building safe and comfortable to live in. The rents are controlled by law. I can't raise them even if I wanted to, and I don't want to. Why should we believe you? Because 6 months ago, I was living in a place just like this, Elena said quietly. Working double shifts to keep a roof over my head while my father fought cancer. I know what it's like to be one bad month away from homelessness. I'm not here to displace you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I'm here to help. Something shifted in the older woman's expression. What are you planning to fix? Elena pulled out her tablet, showing them the renovation plan she'd developed. New boiler so you have consistent heat. Roof repairs to stop the leaks in the top floor units. Updated plumbing to fix the water pressure issues. Fresh paint in common areas, security improvements, proper lighting in the stairwells. All of it funded by the company, none of it passed on to you in rent increases. The tenants exchanged glances, their suspicion warring with hope. Another woman spoke up, younger, with a toddler on her hip. What's the catch? The catch is, I need your cooperation, Elena said honestly. Contractors will need access to apartments, work will be disruptive, and there will be noise and inconvenience. But I promise to schedule everything around your needs and communicate every step of the process. Mrs. Rodriguez studied Elena for a long moment. You're very young to have this much authority. I'm 23, Elena acknowledged, and I'm learning as I go. But I care about getting this right, Mrs. Rodriguez. I care about making this building somewhere you're proud to live. Give me a chance to prove it. The older woman's expression softened. Okay, Miss Vale. We'll give you a chance, but we'll be watching. I wouldn't expect anything less, Elena said, and meant it. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of Elena's life. She coordinated contractors, managed budgets, dealt with unexpected problems that ate into her margins. She spent hours in tenant apartments, listening to complaints, addressing concerns, building trust one conversation at a time. The work was exhausting and often frustrating, but it was also deeply satisfying. Elena watched the building transform, saw pride return to residents' faces as their homes improved, felt the community shift from hostile to cautiously hopeful. Victor visited once, unannounced, walking through the building with Elena while contractors worked around them. He said nothing, just observed with that sharp intelligence that missed nothing, and Elena's stomach churned with anxiety about his judgment. The boiler replacement was expensive, she said, as they stood in the basement watching the new system being installed. I went over budget by 15%, but the old one was a safety hazard, and you made the right call, Victor interrupted. A working boiler is non-negotiable. What about the roof? Repairs are scheduled for next week, weather permitting. I got 3 quotes and went with the middle option. Not the cheapest, but a company with good references who'll warranty the work. Victor's lips curved in approval. Smart. And the tenants? They're cautiously optimistic, Elena said. Mrs. Rodriguez on the second floor has been particularly helpful, acting as liaison with the other residents. I'm thinking of hiring her part-time as building manager once the renovations are complete. That's an excellent idea, Victor said. Shows respect for the existing community and ensures continuity of care. Well done, Elena. The praise made her glow with pride. They climbed back to the first floor, and Victor paused in the lobby, studying the fresh paint and new lighting. You care about these people, he observed, more than the profit margins. Is that a problem? It's unexpected, Victor said. Most property managers see tenants as revenue sources or potential liabilities. You see them as people deserving dignity and quality housing. They are people deserving dignity and quality housing, Elena said firmly. Just because they can't afford luxury doesn't mean they should live in buildings that leak and freeze. Victor turned to face her fully, something intense burning in his dark eyes. Do you know what you're doing, Elena? You're making it very hard for me to maintain professional distance when you say things like that. Elena's breath caught. The attraction that had been simmering between them for weeks suddenly felt immediate and overwhelming. They were alone in the lobby, the sounds of construction muffled by closed doors, and Victor was looking at her like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. Maybe I don't want you to maintain professional distance, Elena heard herself say. Victor's expression shifted. Surprise, heat, hunger all flashing across his face in quick succession. He took a step closer, close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, could see the silver threading through his dark hair. Be very sure about what you're saying, he said quietly, because once we cross this line, there's no going back to what we were before. What were we before? Elena challenged. Employer and employee. Mentor and student. Safe. Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone in the gesture that had become familiar. This, whatever this becomes, won't be safe, Elena. I'm not a safe man, and what I want from you isn't simple. What do you want from me? Victor's smile was sharp and dangerous. Everything. Your trust, your loyalty, your brilliant mind and fierce heart. I want to wake up to you in my bed and fall asleep knowing you're mine. I want to build an empire with you instead of for you. I want... He stopped, something like vulnerability flickering across his face. I want things I haven't wanted in 15 years, and it terrifies me how much I want them with you. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment. The choice that would change everything. She could step back, maintain professional boundaries, keep herself safe from the intensity of what Victor was offering, or she could step forward and claim what she wanted. Elena closed the distance between them and kissed him. Victor's response was immediate and overwhelming. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flesh against him, and he kissed her like a man who'd been holding back for weeks and had finally been given permission to take what he wanted. This wasn't the controlled kiss from their first night or the gentle exploration in his office. This was raw hunger, desperate need, the collision of two people who'd been circling each other's gravity for too long. Elena's hands tangled in Victor's hair, pulling him closer, wanting more. His hands roamed her back, her sides, mapping her body through the expensive clothes he'd bought her. The lobby was public, the risk of discovery real, but neither of them seemed to care. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me tonight." It wasn't a question, but Elena answered anyway. "Yes." Victor's smile was pure satisfaction. He pressed one more kiss to her lips, softer this time, almost tender. "Finish your work here. I'll send the car for you at 7. He left before Elena could respond, and she stood alone in the lobby trying to steady her racing heart and scattered thoughts. She'd just agreed to sleep with Victor Russo. She'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And she didn't regret it for a second. The rest of the day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Elena finished coordinating with contractors, checked in with Mrs. Rodriguez, and reviewed the budget one more time to ensure she hadn't missed any critical expenses. But her mind was elsewhere, imagining what the evening would bring, what it would mean to fully commit to this relationship with Victor. At 6:30, she returned to her apartment and stood in front of her closet, paralyzed by indecision. What did you wear to seduce a man who'd already seen through every defense you had? Everything felt wrong, too casual, too formal, too obvious. She finally settled on a simple black dress that hugged her curves without being overtly sexual, paired with the heels Victor had bought her weeks ago. Her reflection looked confident, sophisticated, nothing like the girl who'd stood outside Adrian's bedroom wearing red silk and carrying cheap champagne. That girl was gone. Elena had become someone new, someone powerful, someone valuable, someone brave enough to take what she wanted. Victor's car arrived exactly at 7. The driver said nothing, just held the door and drove with practiced efficiency through Manhattan traffic. They headed uptown, into neighborhoods Elena had only seen in movies, stopping finally at a brownstone that radiated quiet wealth. Victor opened the door himself, and the sight of him in casual clothes, dark jeans and a fitted shirt, made Elena's mouth go dry. He'd always been attractive in his suits, but this relaxed version of him was devastating. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice, like he'd genuinely worried she might change her mind. "I said I would," Elena replied, stepping into his home. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Sophisticated, masculine, expensive without being ostentatious. Original artwork covered the walls, furniture that looked comfortable and well used, evidence of a life lived rather than just displayed. Victor led her to the kitchen where he'd already started preparing dinner. Elena watched in surprise as he moved around the space with competent ease, chopping vegetables and managing multiple pans like someone who actually knew how to cook. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "You cook," Elena said. "I didn't expect that." "I spent 10 years in Italy," Victor reminded her. "You can't live there without learning to appreciate good food. And I don't like being dependent on staff for basic needs." He poured her wine and gestured for her to sit at the kitchen island. Elena settled onto a stool, sipping her drink and watching Victor work. There was something intimate about this, more intimate than the kiss in the lobby, more revealing than any conversation they'd had. "Tell me about Italy," Elena said, "about building your first properties there." Victor's smile was nostalgic. "I was 23, arrogant, and convinced I could revolutionize European real estate. I had just enough money from my first American deals to be dangerous, and not enough experience to know how badly things could go wrong." "What happened?" "Everything that could go wrong did go wrong," Victor said, laughing. "My first project ran over budget, the contractors were corrupt, I didn't speak enough Italian to navigate the bureaucracy, and I nearly lost everything." He plated their food with practiced efficiency, pasta with fresh vegetables and herbs that smelled incredible. "But I learned. I hired local advisors, built relationships, made myself indispensable to the right people. Within 3 years, I owned 6 buildings and had made back everything I'd lost and more." "How did you know which people were the right ones?" Victor set a plate in front of her and settled onto the stool beside her, close enough that their knees touched. "I learned to read people, to understand what they wanted, and position myself as the solution. It's the same skill I use now, identifying needs and filling them before anyone else realizes the opportunity exists." "Is that what you did with me?" Elena asked quietly. Identified my needs and positioned yourself as the solution? Victor held her gaze. Yes, but that doesn't make my feelings less real or my investment less genuine. I saw someone brilliant being wasted in a diner, someone with fire and intelligence trapped by circumstance. I wanted to set you free, partly because it served my interests, partly because I couldn't stand seeing that potential squandered. And now? Now I want you because you're extraordinary, Victor said simply. Because you transformed a hostile building into a community, because you care about people others dismiss, because you kissed me in that lobby like you weren't afraid of what it meant. Elena's heart raced. I am afraid, terrified actually. Good, Victor said, surprising her. Fear means you understand the stakes. Only fools rush into relationships like this without fear. They ate in companionable silence, the food as delicious as it smelled. After, Victor led her to the living room where floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city spread out below them like a glittering carpet. I'm going to ask you something, Victor said, settling beside her on the couch, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you want this because you want me, or because you want revenge on Adrian? Elena turned to face him fully. Both, she admitted. At first, this was absolutely about revenge, about making Adrian see that I was worth more than he treated me. But somewhere in the past 2 months, that stopped being the primary motivation. What is the primary motivation now? You, Elena said quietly. The way you see me, the way you challenge me and believe in me and make me want to be better than I thought I could be. I want this because being with you makes me feel powerful instead of powerless. Because when you kiss me, I feel like I matter. Victor's expression softened. You do matter, more than you know. He pulled her into his lap, and Elena went willingly, her legs straddling his thighs, her hands resting on his shoulders. This close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the scar through his eyebrow, all the evidence of a life lived fully. I'm going to ask you one more question, Victor said, his hand settling on her waist, thumbs brushing under the hem of her dress. And then I'm done talking. Are you sure this is what you want? Because once we do this, everything changes. You become mine, Elena, publicly, privately, completely. Can you handle that? Elena thought about Adrian's accusations, about the whispers in the office, about all the ways this relationship could destroy the professional reputation she'd been building. Then she thought about how Victor made her feel, seen, valued, powerful. And the decision became easy. I'm sure, she said, and kissed him to prove it. Victor's bedroom was all clean lines and masculine elegance, the kind of space that spoke of a man who knew exactly what he wanted and refused to settle for less. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, curtains pulled back to let the lights paint patterns across the dark hardwood floors. The bed dominated the room, massive and inviting, covered in sheets that probably cost more than Elena's first car. She stood at the foot of it, her heart racing, as Victor moved around the room lighting candles with the same deliberate care he brought to everything. The gesture was unexpectedly romantic, and something in Elena's chest tightened at the realization that this mattered to him. She mattered to him. Nervous? Victor asked, turning to face her. Terrified, Elena admitted. With Adrian, I was going to, but I never actually... I know, Victor said gently, closing the distance between them. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. We can stop, right now, right here. No judgment, no pressure. You can sleep in the guest room, and tomorrow we'll pretend this never happened. Elena's laugh was shaky. That's the opposite of helpful. Then tell me what would be helpful. Elena thought about it, about what she needed in this moment. Not gentleness. She'd been treated gently her whole life, like something fragile that might break. What she needed was the same intensity Victor brought to everything else, the certainty that made her feel powerful instead of vulnerable. Don't treat me like I'm breakable, she said finally. Don't hold back because you think I can't handle it. I want all of you, Victor, not some careful, gentle version. Victor's eyes darkened with heat and approval. Be very sure about that, Elena, because I've been holding back since the moment you walked into my office. If I stop holding back, I won't be gentle. Good, Elena said, and pulled him down to kiss her. This kiss was different from all the ones before, deeper, hungrier, edged with the knowledge that nothing would interrupt them this time. Victor's hands moved to the zipper of her dress, pulling it down with agonizing slowness, and the fabric pooled at her feet, leaving Elena standing in just her underwear and heels. Victor stepped back, his gaze tracking over her body with an appreciation that made Elena feel beautiful instead of exposed. "You're extraordinary," he said, voice rough. "Do you have any idea how long I've been imagining this?" "Show me," Elena challenged. What followed was a revelation. Victor undressed her completely, his hands and mouth mapping every inch of her skin like he was memorizing her. He was patient despite the hunger in his eyes, bringing Elena to the edge of pleasure over and over until she was shaking and desperate and completely his. When he finally entered her, there was pain, sharp and brief. But Victor held her through it, his voice a low murmur of reassurance in her ear. And then the pain transformed into something else entirely, into pleasure that built and built until Elena shattered in his arms, crying out his name like a prayer. Victor followed her over the edge moments later, his control finally breaking, and they collapsed together in a tangle of limbs and racing hearts. Afterward, Elena lay with her head on Victor's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. His hand traced lazy patterns on her back, and the intimacy of the moment felt almost more overwhelming than the sex had been. "Are you okay?" Victor asked quietly. "I'm better than okay," Elena said honestly. "I'm trying to figure out why I waited so long to do that." Victor's laugh rumbled through his chest. "Because you were waiting for the right person. And despite my many flaws, I like to think I'm the right person for you." Elena propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the candlelight. "You are," she said. "Which is terrifying because I didn't think I'd feel this way again after Adrian. I didn't think I'd trust anyone enough to let them in." "Trust is different from love," Victor said carefully. "You can trust someone's intentions without loving them. The question is which one you feel for me." Elena's breath caught. They danced around the word for weeks, acknowledged the attraction and the connection, but neither had been brave enough to name the deeper emotion growing between them. Now Victor was asking her to be brave, to name what she felt, to make herself vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical intimacy. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Elena whispered, which is probably insane given everything that's happened, given how we started, given that you're my boss and my ex's father and 1,000 other complications. But I can't help it. When I'm with you, I feel like the best version of myself. Like I can be powerful and vulnerable at the same time. Victor's expression shifted. Surprise, pleasure, and something that looked dangerously like love reflecting back at her. "I am in love with you," he said simply. "Not falling, not beginning to. I'm already there. You walked into my office 2 months ago wearing that red dress and demanded to be seen, and I've been lost ever since." Elena kissed him, tasting salt on her lips and realizing she was crying. Happy tears, overwhelming tears, tears that came from finally feeling chosen instead of used. They made love again, slower this time, learning each other's rhythms and responses. And when they finally fell asleep wrapped around each other, Elena felt more at peace than she had in years. Morning brought reality crashing back. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Victor already dressed for work, sitting on the edge of the bed with coffee and a serious expression. "We need to talk about how we handle this publicly," he said without preamble. Elena sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "What do you mean?" "We're going to have to be strategic about announcing our relationship," Victor explained. "The office already suspects something, but confirmation will create complications. Adrian will lose his mind. The board will have questions about propriety. The media will run stories about age differences and power dynamics. So what do you suggest?" Victor handed her a coffee, perfectly made with the exact amount of cream she preferred, and settled more comfortably on the bed. "We control the narrative. We don't hide the relationship, but we also don't flaunt it. You continue proving yourself professionally, building your reputation as someone valuable independent of our personal connection. In 6 months, when you've successfully managed the Brooklyn property and taken on additional responsibilities, we make the relationship official." 6 months of hiding? Elena asked carefully. 6 months of being strategic, Victor corrected. "We'll still see each other, still be together privately. But publicly, we maintain professional boundaries. It protects you from accusations of sleeping your way to success and protects the company from questions about favoritism." Elena understood the logic, even as part of her rebelled against more hiding, more pretending. "And Adrian?" "Adrian will find out regardless of what we do," Victor said flatly. "But if we wait, if you establish yourself first, his accusations will carry less weight. Right now, he could argue you seduced me for revenge and advancement. In 6 months, when you've proven your value, that narrative becomes much harder to sell. It made sense. Elena hated that it made sense, but she couldn't argue with Victor's reasoning. Okay, 6 months. But I have one condition. Name it. In 6 months, when we go public, we do it completely. No half measures, no careful PR statements. I want everyone to know that I chose you and you chose me, and anyone who has a problem with it can deal with us together. Victor's smile was fierce and proud. Deal. The next 6 months were the most intense of Elena's life. She threw herself into work with single-minded determination, managing the Brooklyn property with a skill that surprised even Diane. The building transformation was complete by month 3. New boiler, repaired roof, updated plumbing, fresh paint throughout. Tenant satisfaction went from hostile to exemplary, and Elena's budget came in 2% under projection. Victor gave her 2 more properties to manage, then 4, then an entire portfolio of residential buildings across Brooklyn and Queens. Elena hired Mrs. Rodriguez as her assistant building manager, creating a bridge between the company and communities that had learned to distrust corporate landlords. At night, Elena went to Victor's brownstone where they built a private world separate from their professional lives. They cooked together, argued about renovations and strategies, made love with an intensity that never diminished. Victor taught her about wine and art and the subtle politics of high society. Elena taught him about the communities they served, about the difference between managing properties and actually caring for the people who lived in them. 3 months in, Elena's father was declared cancer-free. She brought Victor to the celebration dinner at the rehabilitation center, introducing him as her boss and mentor. Thomas Vale shook Victor's hand with genuine gratitude, thanking him for giving Elena opportunities that had changed their lives. "Your daughter is remarkable," Victor said, and the pride in his voice made Elena's chest tight. "She's going to run this company one day, if she wants to." Thomas looked between them with knowing eyes, but said nothing about the obvious affection beneath the professional words. Later, as Elena walked Victor to his car, her father pulled her aside. "He loves you," Thomas said quietly. "I can see it in how he looks at you, and you love him back." "Is that a problem?" Elena asked carefully. Her father smiled. "You're happy. You're successful. You're becoming someone extraordinary. How could that be a problem? Just promise me one thing. Make sure he knows you chose him, not his money or his power. Make sure he understands your worth isn't tied to what he can give you." "I will, Dad," Elena promised, and meant it. 4 months in, Adrian made one final attempt at reconciliation. He showed up at the Brooklyn property where Elena was meeting with contractors, looking haggard and desperate. "I miss you," he said without preamble. "I know I fucked up. I know I hurt you. But Elena, I've changed. I've been in therapy, working on myself, trying to understand why I treated you that way. Give me another chance, please." Elena looked at him and felt nothing but mild pity. This boy who'd once made her believe in fairy tales now looked small and lost, still trying to manipulate her with different words. "No," she said simply. "I hope therapy helps you, Adrian. I hope you become a better person. But I'm not interested in being part of that journey. I've moved on." "To my father," Adrian said bitterly. "You're with him, aren't you? Don't lie. I can see it in your face." "What I am or am not with your father is none of your business," Elena said calmly. "But I will tell you this. I'm with someone who sees my value, who challenges me to be better, who treats me like an equal instead of a conquest. Whether that's your father or someone else entirely doesn't matter. What matters is that I chose myself, Adrian. I chose my own growth and happiness over any man. That's what you can never understand." Adrian left without another word, and Elena felt something in her chest finally settle. She'd gotten her revenge, not through public humiliation or calculated cruelty, but by becoming someone he could never touch, never diminish, never use again. 5 months in, Elena was promoted to Director of Residential Properties, overseeing a team of 12 managers and a portfolio worth over $200 million. The promotion came with a significant raise, a corner office, and the respect of colleagues who'd initially dismissed her as Victor's flavor of the month. Diane took her to lunch to celebrate, and over expensive wine, the older woman fixed Elena with a knowing look. "You and Victor aren't as subtle as you think." Elena's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you mean." "Please," Diane said with a smile. I've worked for Victor for 15 years. I know how he looks at business associates versus how he looks at you. And I've watched you become someone extraordinary these past months, not because of him, but because you had it in you all along and he was smart enough to recognize it. Are people talking? Elena asked carefully. People are always talking, Diane said dismissively, but the talk has shifted. 6 months ago, they said you were sleeping your way to success. Now they say you're the most competent director we've had in years, and Victor would be a fool to let you go. Results speak louder than rumors, Elena. Remember that. The validation meant more than Elena had expected. She'd spent months proving herself, and finally, people were seeing her for who she'd become rather than where she'd started. 6 months to the day after Elena had first slept with Victor, he took her to dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan. They'd been careful about public appearances, but tonight Victor requested a table in the main dining room where everyone could see them. Are you sure about this? Elena asked as they were seated. I've never been more sure of anything, Victor said, taking her hand across the table in a gesture that was unmistakably romantic. 6 months ago, I promised you we'd go public when you were ready. Are you ready, Elena? Elena looked around the restaurant, aware of the eyes tracking their joined hands, the whispers already starting. She thought about Adrian's accusations, about the office gossip, about every reason this was complicated and potentially career-destroying. Then she looked at Victor, this man who'd seen her potential when she was invisible, who'd challenged her to become powerful instead of keeping her small, who'd loved her fiercely while giving her space to grow. I'm ready, she said. Victor lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in a gesture that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Then let them talk. Let them speculate and judge and make their assumptions, because the truth is simpler than any story they'll invent. I love you, Elena Vale, and I want the world to know it. Elena's eyes stung with happy tears. I love you too. The announcement sent shockwaves through the company and their social circles. The media ran predictable stories about age differences and power dynamics. The board called a special meeting to discuss potential conflicts of interest. Adrian released a statement to the press claiming Elena had seduced his father for revenge, painting himself as the victim. But Elena had anticipated all of it. She'd built her professional reputation on solid ground, and when reporters came asking questions, her results spoke for themselves. The Brooklyn property she'd transformed was featured in a real estate magazine as a model of responsible urban development. Her tenant satisfaction scores were the highest in the company. Her team was loyal and productive. Victor stood beside her through every interview, every meeting, every challenge. But he let Elena speak for herself, let her defend her own competence, let her prove that she was more than his girlfriend. She was a force in her own right. 3 months after going public, the board approved a new division of Russo Properties focused on affordable housing development. Victor appointed Elena as its head, giving her authority to pursue projects that balanced profit with social responsibility. This is your vision, he told her in his office the day the announcement went out. Building communities, not just buildings. Proving that good business and social good aren't mutually exclusive. I'm giving you the resources to make it happen. Elena stared at him, overwhelmed. This is more than I ever dreamed of. You deserve more than dreams, Victor said simply. You deserve reality. You deserve power used for purpose. You deserve everything you've worked for, and more. He pulled her into his arms, and Elena breathed in the familiar scent of his cologne, feeling grateful and terrified and absolutely certain all at once. Marry me, Victor said against her hair. Elena pulled back, searching his face. What? Marry me, he repeated, more firmly this time. Not because it's expected, not because it solves our PR problems. Marry me because I want to build this empire with you, not just beside you. Because I want legal recognition that you're my equal, my partner, my choice. Elena's heart raced. Marriage. She hadn't let herself think that far ahead, hadn't dared imagine that Victor would want something so permanent. I don't need marriage to feel equal to you, she said carefully. I know, but I need it. Victor's vulnerability showed in his eyes. I need the world to know you're not my girlfriend or my employee or some temporary fixture in my life. You're my partner, my family, my future. Say yes, Elena. Choose me the way I choose you. Elena thought about the girl who'd stood outside Adrian's bedroom 6 months ago, heartbroken and humiliated, clutching cheap champagne and shattered dreams. That girl had wanted fairy tales and romance and pretty lies. The woman she'd become wanted something different, partnership built on respect, love built on truth, power shared instead of hoarded. Yes, Elena said, I'll marry you. Victor's kiss tasted like triumph and promise. When he pulled back, his smile was brighter than Elena had ever seen it. There's one more thing, he said, pulling a small box from his desk drawer. Inside was a ring that took Elena's breath away, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the light like captured fire. It was my mother's, Victor said quietly. The only thing of value she owned. She gave it to me before she died and made me promise to give it to someone who understood what we came from, who knew what it meant to build something from nothing. That's you, Elena. You understand. Elena's vision blurred with tears as Victor slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. The engagement announcement made headlines for a week. Adrian gave another bitter interview, but this time no one cared. The narrative had shifted completely. Elena wasn't a gold digger or a vengeful ex. She was a rising star in real estate, a champion of affordable housing, a woman who'd transformed herself through intelligence and determination. The wedding took place 6 months later in a small ceremony at Victor's brownstone. Elena wore a dress she'd chosen herself, elegant and modern, nothing like the red silk that had started everything. Her father walked her down the makeshift aisle with tears of pride in his eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez attended with several other tenants from Elena's properties, their presence a reminder of why Elena's work mattered beyond profit margins. Diane served as Elena's witness, and even Margaret dabbed at her eyes during the vows. When Victor kissed his bride, sealing their partnership officially and irrevocably, Elena felt the weight of every choice that had led to this moment, the heartbreak that had broken her, the rage that had driven her to Victor's office, the courage to accept his offer, the work that had proven her worth, the love that had grown from strategy into something real. She was no longer the invisible girl from Queens, working herself to death for survival. She was Elena Russo, director of affordable housing development, wife to one of the most powerful men in the city, architect of her own empire. The reception was intimate, close friends and family only, an evening of good food and better conversation. As the night wound down, Elena found herself on the brownstone's terrace, looking out over the city that had once seemed impossible to conquer. Victor joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Any regrets? None, Elena said honestly. This isn't the fairy tale I thought I wanted, but it's better. It's real. What happened to the girl who believed in fairy tales? Victor asked, amusement in his voice. She grew up, Elena said. She learned that the best stories aren't about princes rescuing princesses. They're about queens building kingdoms and choosing partners who help them rule. Victor turned her in his arms, his expression serious despite the joy of the day. I want you to know something. Every decision I made with you, hiring you, training you, promoting you, those were based on your merit, not our relationship. You earned everything you have, Elena. Never doubt that. I know, Elena said, but thank you for saying it. She kissed him as the city glittered around them, thinking about how far she'd come from that terrible night outside Adrian's bedroom. She'd thought her life was ending. Instead, it had been beginning, a transformation from victim to victor, from powerless to powerful, from invisible to undeniable. The red dress that had felt like a costume on that awful night now hung in her closet as a reminder, not of heartbreak, but of the moment everything changed, the moment she stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing herself. 1 year later, Elena stood in front of a crowd at the grand opening of the Vail Foundation's first affordable housing complex. 200 units of quality housing for working families, built with the same care and attention Elena brought to everything. The building bore her father's name, a tribute to the man who taught her the value of hard work and human dignity. Victor stood beside her, his hand resting proudly on the small of her back. In her other hand, Elena held the hand of their daughter, 3-month-old Sophia, named for Victor's mother, sleeping peacefully despite the crowd and cameras. The press had made much of Elena's pregnancy, speculating about timing and motivations. But Elena had learned to ignore the noise and focus on results. The foundation was real. The housing was real. The families moving into quality homes were real. That mattered more than any tabloid story. As Elena cut the ribbon officially opening the complex, she caught sight of Mrs. Rodriguez in the crowd, the older woman beaming with pride. Several of Elena's former tenants stood nearby, living proof that corporate development and community care weren't mutually exclusive. Adrian had sent flowers, an olive branch extended too late to matter. Elena had donated them to the community center without a second thought. She'd forgiven him for the hurt he'd caused, but she'd never forget the lesson he'd taught her, that her worth wasn't determined by who loved her, but by who she chose to become. Later that evening, back at the brownstone with Sophia asleep in her nursery, Elena found Victor in his study reviewing plans for the Foundation's next project. "You should be celebrating," she said, settling into his lap. "I am celebrating," Victor said, pulling her close. "By making sure we can build 3 more complexes like today's. The board approved the expansion budget." Elena laughed, warm and genuine. "You're incorrigible. We just opened 1 building and you're already planning 3 more. "I learned from the best," Victor said, kissing her temple. "A certain director of affordable housing who refuses to settle for good enough when great is possible." They sat together in comfortable silence, the city lights painting patterns across the study walls. Sophia made a small noise through the baby monitor, then settled back into sleep. The brownstone felt full in a way it never had before. Full of love, full of purpose, full of family. "Do you ever think about how we started?" Elena asked quietly. "About that night in your office?" "Every day," Victor admitted. "I think about the girl who walked in demanding to be seen, who was brave enough to accept my offer despite every reason to walk away. I think about how easily I could have missed you, how close you came to staying invisible. I think about how I almost chose Adrian," Elena said, "how I almost gave myself to someone who saw me as worthless. If I hadn't overheard that conversation, then you would have found another path," Victor interrupted firmly. "Maybe not with me, maybe not as quickly, but you would have found your way to power eventually. That drive, that hunger for more, it was in you long before you met either of us. I just helped you recognize it." Elena turned to kiss him properly, tasting gratitude and love and the comfortable certainty of partnership. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me when I was invisible, for challenging me when I was comfortable, for loving me when I was still learning to love myself." "Thank you for choosing me," Victor replied, "for trusting me despite every reason not to, for building this empire with me instead of being content to live in mine." They made love in Victor's study, gentle and familiar and still electric after all this time. And when they finally went to bed, tangled together in sheets that no longer felt foreign, Elena felt the deep satisfaction of a life well built. The cage she'd once feared had become a crown she chose to wear. The power she'd desperately sought had transformed into purpose. The revenge she'd wanted had evolved into something better. Success so complete that Adrian's betrayal had become irrelevant, a footnote in the story of her transformation. Elena Russo had started as a waitress from Queens who believed in fairy tales. She'd become a queen who built kingdoms, a partner who wielded power with purpose, a woman who'd discovered that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming so extraordinary that the people who'd underestimated you became irrelevant. She'd entered Victor's world as a wounded girl seeking revenge. She'd emerged as a strategist, a leader, a force who changed communities and created opportunities for people the world had dismissed as unworthy of investment. The red dress still hung in her closet, a reminder of heartbreak transformed into power. But Elena rarely looked at it anymore. She was too busy building the future, one affordable housing complex at a time, one empowered community at a time, one deliberate choice at a time. She'd chosen survival, she'd chosen power, she'd chosen herself. And she'd never been invisible again.